Sometimes when we explain the phrase Shabbat Shalom to kids, we say it means that we're saying shalom to the past 6 days that just happened. Goodbye to all that service of what we leave behind. And also, I suppose, to say shalom or hello to a bit of rest. As we end another week of reading and watching the news, which felt like deja vu at times for me, that's the energy I'm trying to channel tonight, saying goodbye to all that and welcoming Shabbat. This past week, Super Tuesday brought a near confirmation of what we'd expected was ahead for the rest of 2024, a double re-election campaign between Biden and Trump. And then we had last night's State of the Union address, which, for me anyway, kind of reified a sense of dread. It was decent political theater, but still, it was somewhat fearful, or made me fearful about what lies before us. And then, of course, this week brought more bad news from Gaza, as Hamas and Israel yet again failed to reach a ceasefire agreement. These news items themselves were exhausting, but so was the analysis that I read, as were the conversations I had with people around what they thought about the headlines this week. It just feels so predictable, like we've been here for too long, succumbing to the same arguments we've already made or always made, screaming into a void or finding solace in people with whom we already agree. I don't know about you, but I have become somewhat anesthetized to the cycle of it. Civic life feels so noisy, yet with nothing new or significant to offer. Everyone says exactly what you know they will. Your left-wing friends, your right-wing family. Wasn't really supposed to be a laugh line, but fine. There's always one. I just want to say Shabbat Shalom to all of that right now as I try to rest and find some balance between my values and also my reality. As I considered this moment in our collective life, Jewish life, American life, human life, I wondered where we might find ourselves in Torah. That is my job every week as we settle into Shabbat. But seeing ourselves and the chaos in which we live is not so easy this week in Torah, with yet another parsha devoted to the nitty-gritty details of constructing the tabernacle. Poles and rings and lengths and cubits. It's a tedious text, seemingly far away from anything we know in our day-to-day lives. But still we must ask, where can we see ourselves in this parsha? In Vayakhel, Bezalel fashions all manner of accoutrement for the Mishkan. An altar of acacia wood, horns on its four corners overlaid with copper. He makes the utensils for the altar, pails and basins and fire pans. He makes hooks and poles by which to carry the altar to keep it portable. All the dimensions and weights described to a T. And just when our minds start to wander as we read this repetition of details, as Bezalel makes a laver or a basin for the priests to wash themselves, we read something strange. We read that he takes marot, mirrors. Specifically, marot hatzovot asher tzov'u petach ohel moed. He took as material mirrors from the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. To be honest, folks, I read the parsha a few times before I picked up on that line. The whole thing is a laundry list of different elements, and I usually breeze past all of it. But the mirrors stuck out as unusual building material. Something is up with these mirrors, I thought. In these mirrors, perhaps we might see ourselves in this parsha, because in many ways, public life feels like a carnival of mirrors. Many of us surround ourselves with people who reflect us, and we often look away when they do not. The policy proposals of our elected leaders feel stale, almost as if they're bouncing back from 4 years ago, distorted, but refracted through a familiar lens. And with our subconscious memories of the COVID lockdown beginning almost exactly 4 years ago, there's just a vibe of we've been here before that's kind of going around right now. I don't know how you feel, but that's how it's felt to me. Another way of thinking about that deja vu we might feel right now is that it's a mirror of 2020 and maybe 2016 and every election and news cycle in between. I considered all this as I confronted the mirrors in this parsha, and I looked to the sages for guidance. First, as usual, I went to Rashi to better understand the mirrors of the Mishkan. But I gotta be honest with you, this one's kind of a weird one. Rashi explains about these mirrors that the Israelite women used these mirrors to adorn themselves with makeup and finery. Initially, Rashi says, Moses rejected these items, saying they were symbols of vanity with no place in the Mishkan, until God intervened and said, no, I want those mirrors. Because through those mirrors, the Israelite women were able to produce multitudes of children in Egypt. Okay, fine. Rashi brings us this story from an earlier midrash, which is somewhat bizarre, which essentially says that the mirrors of Israelite women allowed them to seduce their husbands, which in this moment God says is a good thing. It kind of lost me for a while, until I realized that, like us today, reading a parsha filled with technical instruction, the rabbis of 2,000 years ago were probably also trying to keep the parsha interesting for themselves. We're still talking about the tabernacle here and the materials used to build it, but still we can allow ourselves this brief midrashic detour to spice things up. In the story, Moses resists. He says, our meeting place with God should not be made of such base human instruments. God intervenes to say that mirrors reflect human desire and therefore should be part of the Mishkan. And thus the mirrors remain as a symbol of human instinct. Extrapolating from this to approach our present moment, if we can, we might say that mirrors, both literally and figuratively, are inevitable in the way of human beings. It is normal to seek a reflection of something we know, something that comforts us or helps us to feel more secure. And this behavior is healthy at times. But caught as we are now in a kind of rewind and repeat, trapped in our own reflection, we might try to push ourselves to find something new and different, something yet unseen that helps us get unstuck. Avoiding mirrors today might mean starting a conversation with someone from a different generation or class, reading less of the opinion section, or merely trying to inhabit the world as it exists in real life and not on social media. Anything we can do to see reality without those familiar distortions. It's far harder to step out into what doesn't feel recognizable, which sometimes requires trial and error. But I think that might be what we need to do, collectively and individually, if we are to move beyond feeling like everything today is an echo of what was. We might need to sacrifice the comfort of mirrors and push ourselves to find something else. Abraham ibn Ezra, a Spanish sage, differs from Rashi, fortunately, in his understanding of the Mishkan's mirrors. He says, mirrors made of bronze were devices used to focus on the self, like fixing one's hair in the morning. But Israelite women were devoted servants of God, willing to give up this worldly fixation in service of something bigger than themselves. They gave up their mirrors and came daily to pray near the Mishkan to hear words of God. For Ibn Ezra, the point of the mirrors is not how they had been used previously, but the fact that they had been given up. The Israelites who abandoned them were seeking not to behave in the ways that they used to. They chose to move beyond what made them feel pretty or witty or wise, to create a vessel of holiness and true connection for the collective. And I think, friends, that this might be what we need right now. The chance to give up familiar reflections of what was in order to create something far better, a vision of something else. It's notable that the Hebrew word for mirrors, mar'ot, can also be translated as visions. This makes sense given that vision is what you see in the mirror, but mar'eh can also have a more expansive meaning, as it does elsewhere in the Bible, to refer to an insight given directly to a person from God, a vision for the future, something surprising, something new, and ultimately true. Only by sacrificing our mirrors can we turn toward new visions. This Shabbat offers us a chance to turn away from familiar mirrors, at least for a moment, to let light reflect off of them, to fill the room maybe, and to allow ourselves to turn toward our experience and not toward our own image or expectations. And maybe there, in that space away from predictable reflections, we might see a vision of something else. Shabbat Shalom.